If you press play on this video, chances are you have a podcast that you're excited about, you have an audience that you're starting to grow, and now you're thinking, well, what can I do with that audience? How can I actually create a two-way relationship with them and start to actually build a community around my podcast? It's a really, really good question to be asking yourself, because as we know, getting new listeners is one thing, but keeping them around and engaged with you and what it is that you have to offer is a whole nother kettle of fish. It's something that I've honestly struggled with myself because I'm actually quite an introvert, and it's building a community and having to engage with people is generally one of the last things I think about. Okay, like surround myself with more people. Why would I want to do that? But that is not how you grow and retain podcast listeners or clients for your business. So luckily for me and you, I spoke to a community building expert for one of my podcast episodes on the Grow My Podcast show. And she shared with me her top 3 tips to building an engaged community for your podcast. Ariel Nissenblatt is the head of community and content for Squadcast, and she's the founder of Earbuds Collective. So let's just say she knows a thing or two about building communities. So with that said, let's get into her first step to building a community.
First question to ask when building a community for your podcast is, does that community want to be a community? Don't get wrapped up in the buzziness of the word community. Think about what your ideal listener is doing while they're listening to your podcast.
Okay, so we know now whether our podcast listeners even want to be part of a community. So what's next?
You need to build education into your community initiatives to make sure that people knew how to use the communication platform that we chose as our primary communication platform. So how are they actually going to stay in touch with us? So we did webinars on how to best take advantage of the Squadcast community initiatives.
Okay, let's just pause here for a quick second and delve a little deeper into this. Let's see some examples of how Ariel implemented this particular step for Squadcast, shall we? So for example, when we actually went to join the Squadcast community ourselves, we can see that they've done a few really cool things. They've created an identity around their community. Check. They've articulated the benefits of joining their community. Awesome. And as we can see here, there is already some education. That's what she spoke about. There are instructions on how to actually join. So they've already started thinking about how to enroll their members into their community. And that is just the starting point. That's just the starting point of the education. Because as Ariel went into, once you've been accepted and you're in the community, you get further instructions on how to join and use Slack, on how to join and use Discord. If you missed our conversation on that, then definitely go ahead and listen to episode 36 of the Grow My Podcast show to find out how she actually does this. I'll leave the link to that below. Okay, so let's get into the third step then, and the last step to building a community for your podcast.
Step 3 for building a community is highlighting that community. I make sure in the Squadcast community to give opportunities for the Squad Pod to feel excited that they're part of the Squadcast communities.
Again, we're going to just quickly pause here and talk through some examples of how we can do this. So, example number 1. You can set up a fan page to activate your raving fans. A really easy way to do this is to use a software called Podinbox. In fact, if you want to hear my conversation with the founder, Pat Chung of Podinbox, on creating your raving fans, then listen to episode 18 of the Grow My Podcast show. I'll leave the link to that below. Now, example number 2 is to invite members of your community onto your podcast. I've done this a few times myself, and the best thing is that not only do you get to spotlight them, but you get to talk about them and how they use your services and the success that they've had from it. Great promotion, not only for them, but also for you. Example number 3 is to collaborate with them on a blog post like we've done here. Again, great way to promote them and you too. And example number 4 is to shout them out in whatever other community comms you have, communications that you have. For example, we like to use email all the time, so we actually spotlight them in our email so that everyone can get to know them. So if your community is on social media, then that makes a lot of sense too. So wherever your community is, find a way to spotlight your people. So there you have it, the 3 steps to building a community for your podcast. I'd love to know how you've implemented any of these 3 steps, so please let me know in the comments below.